Okay, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this webinar, How Industry Can Use Batteries to Cut Their Energy Costs. It's sponsored by ABB and Grid Beyond, and I think we've got a very interesting hour for you. We've got a couple of presentations from Stuart Thompson from ABB and Chris O'Brien from Grid Beyond. Batteries seem to be all the big talk of the energy industry at the moment, and it's particularly important for business, both in terms of resilience and also managing energy costs with all the volatility that we're seeing in the markets at the moment. And this applies as much as it does for small business to medium-sized business and big business, and it will certainly apply to that new big input into Australia's demand profile, which could well be data centres. Anyway, we're going to start off with two presentations. The first from Stuart Thompson from ABB and then from Chris O'Brien at Grid Beyond. Now, we do invite you to participate in the questions, and also we have a couple of polls coming. Possibly the first one after Stuart has spoken, the second one after Chris has spoken, sorry. And if you need to read, or if you'd like to ask a question, please just press on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. There is a chat room as well if you want to sort of have a chatter with people, either on the panel or just a part of the audience, then please do so. But if you do want to ask a question, please put it in the Q&A box. That's where we will find it, and we will endeavour to get through as many questions as we can at the end of the presentations. Anyway, look, without further ado, we're going to get going with the first of our speakers. It's Stuart Thompson. He's the President of Electrification Services at ABB in Australia. He's leading a $1.1 billion business of more than 3,000 global service professionals across 50 countries. It was established as a standalone business in 2022, and Stuart was promoted to manage the new division, having previously held roles as the Global Product Group Service Leader for ABB Electrification and Electrification Distribution Solutions. He's been with ABB since 2018 as part of the GE Industrial Solutions acquisitions. So without any further ado, I'd just like to welcome Stuart.
Hey, thank you, Giles. Thank you for the introduction. So, as Giles said, I look after service for ABB for all the electrification platforms globally. I'm fortunate enough to be in Sydney today to share a little bit with you about what we're doing around battery energy storage, and how we're applying it and working with customers and what some of the challenges are for many of you around the world. So most customers that we talk to talk about this trilemma that they have around balancing the security of their power and their power on their sites, together with the cost and the increasing energy costs, and trying to lower their own costs, but also at the same time working towards a sustainable future. As many companies are trying to reach ESG targets, performance targets that are set by their stakeholders and shareholders, and their own personal belief in the planet. So these are the three sort of burning issues for operators and business owners when it comes to electrification of their sites and energy in their facilities. And that's across different industries as well. So one of the biggest challenges that we see in the segments that we deal with in ABB around the world are really around that trilemma and the disruptions of power and what that can cost them. When we look at the ABB portfolio today, about 20% of our business is in buildings and commercial industrial infrastructure. A similar amount is in oil and gas and utility segments. The fastest growing segment, and Giles hinted to it at the start of the webinar, was around data centers, growing at over 40% a year on a global basis for ABB now. And then there's all of the traditional infrastructures of mining, light industrial premises around the world. If we start with data centers, is probably the hottest topic these days. When we look at outages and performance around outages in data centers, 25% of data center outages cost $1 million or more. If we look at Facebook alone, Facebook in pure global outages last year cost them $100 million. If we look at Amazon, it was about $25 million. And if we went to China and looked at Alibaba, it's almost $1 billion of costs in outages. So that's one of the main reasons why data centers are pushing so hard around their own energy security, their own energy supplies, and that going forward. We all know about the oil and gas and the mining industry and the amount of cost in production downtime that they have. But if we look at the Gartner Institute and how much cost is to general industry and manufacturing, it's around about $5,600 per minute of shutdown costs. And that goes to getting their production lines back up and running, looking at lines like food and beverage, steel production, any kind of manufacturing industry. The average is about $5,600 a minute. So energy security for them is important. When we look at a lot of commercial premises around the world, even like warehouses, distribution, supply chain networks, they've got large real estate rooftops, and many of them have applied solar to those rooftops around the world. But what we haven't seen is the optimization of that rooftop and optimization of that on-site generation that they have. So there's still plenty of opportunity there, which is one of the main areas we've been working on battery energy storage, particularly within continental Europe. We're seeing the continued rise of EV and the push of EV chargers. ABB is one of the leading producers of EV chargers in the world. We've shipped over 1 million chargers around the planet, anything from AC to DC, high-powered DC up to 500 kilowatt. But they also present a lot of challenges to the grid and the grid network, especially in regional and rural production for power and keeping that network and fleet available throughout what is a very broad network within Australia. So the challenges for industry are huge. They're around that trilemma of making sure that we have reliable power, the costs of power, and obviously the costs of disruption, and keeping that green power on site. So ensuring power reliability with battery energy storage, I think one of the key game changers here is the speed at which the batteries can cut in. We're working on two options here. One option is around pure battery energy storage. We've also been applying hybrid energy storage. As we're looking at resilience in the grid and the inertia within the grid, we've also been supplying not only batteries, but batteries in combination with supercapacitors and that in the front end to make sure that that cutover can happen in a very smooth and fast backup plan. Quite a few organisations throughout the Southeast Asian region also have put in place battery energy storage in place of diesel backup and diesel generation, particularly around the Pacific Islands, some of the island nations of Indonesia and the Philippines, where we're monitoring battery energy storage systems across very large fleets across the region, and we do all of that out of our Singapore operation. But the battery energy storage on reliability is not only around the speed of switching, the reliability of the batteries in performance against diesel generation and diesel backup systems and the speed for them to get up to speed, but also stabilizing voltage and frequency in their network. When it comes to driving costs down, it's really around storage of the power when it's at the cheapest price, trading the power, and we're going to get into a little bit of that with Grid Beyond in the later part of the webinar. But it's actually looking at reducing those peak periods, eliminating downtime and outages that we mentioned on the prior page, and really driving a cost-effective outcome. And we've got some interesting financial models that we're going to share, which ABB can offer and bring to the market, not only in the battery energy storage, but in the financing around that to help make that a little bit more affordable. And then obviously the acceleration of sustainability targets is key. for all of us, not only from a personal perspective, but also from industry and share prices for shareholders of many of our customers. When it comes to ABB, many people know us in the electrical industry, in any areas of electrification and automation. I just want to point out that batteries for us have been something that we've been using for many, many years. Plenty of experience in data centers and critical power supplies through UPS systems. We've been running this in both modular and demountable UPSs all the way up to large-scale UPS systems. In fact, medium voltage UPSs globally for ABB are produced in Napier in New Zealand and shipped to AI data centers in the US, Europe, and Asia as well. When it comes to machinery, ABB is very well known for its traction businesses, off-highway vehicle support and mining-based installations, even here in Australia, with off-highway vehicles in the open-cut mines in WA, charging of that, transport infrastructure, both on the rail side, but also in marine. We run marine DC microgrids. We're running large conversion and power system conversions on some of the largest vessels, Icon of the Seas, all the way down to smaller, more agile vessels. All of these are key industries that ABB is growing up on with battery energy storage in some form or function. When it comes to research and development, we are not producers of batteries. We are users of batteries and many suppliers that we partner with on batteries. We're continuing to see developments in technology. Our process here is really to understand that technology, assess it, give recommendations of application to our customers, but we're essentially agnostic to the battery supply. Many of our customers specify the chemistries that they're looking for, the options that they're looking for. Our model here is to validate those offerings, validate that supplier network, and make sure that we have the best option for the application that many customers are looking for. On top of that, we generally see, and as you all know, the growth in battery production. ABB's on both sides of the network here, supporting production, supporting the capacity of production for battery energy storage. And if we look at what we're seeing over the next 6-7 years, you're looking at a 10 times increase in battery energy storage on a global capacity network. That's why it's such an important topic, not only for us from the technology itself, but the distribution and the application for our customers. Production of batteries, 300% increase. We're seeing this every day, not only in vehicles, in transport modes, through rail, as I said, through marine, but we're also seeing it in general industries and utilities. And most of this demand increase is coming from those cost reductions that we're continuing to see within the market. We are seeing a significant cost reduction, making these products much more viable for installations and return on investments, significantly improving year on year at this point in time. Regulation is helping driving that. We're seeing that here in Australia with some of the incentives. We've seen recent, even down at the domestic and the residential levels, continue driven innovation from the government in supporting those sustainability drivers and initiatives. We're also seeing the continued demand from data centers, looking at alternate measurement around how they're storing power and how they're maintaining those assets. If they're going to lose $1 million on an outage, they're investing heavily in energy storage on their sites to back up their systems in real time. They've always done this in a distributed mode. I was with a large hyperscaler in Dublin 6 months ago, and they were taking huge battery energy storage on their site and then supporting the regional grid around Dublin at the same time, making large income out of that whilst also supporting their data center. So huge investments, just driving the price down of battery energy storage and options for customers. If we look at Australia, why are we talking to you here today, in Australia about this? Well, Australia is really at the forefront in this space, and an early adopter, a leading adopter. We see on a global basis 5 main countries where trading of power and favourable use of battery energy storage is adopted. Ireland, UK, Japan, interestingly, and some states in the US, California and Texas in particular. But Australia is really at that forefront. And the demand of power that you're seeing from, and the needs of battery energy storage capacity, we see a projection in the next 6 years of a 600% growth. And this kind of growth is fully planned out. We see the forecasts from the national growth trajectory from AEMO. We know that that's going to hit 22 gigawatts by 2030, but we also know it's 49 gigawatts by 2050. So this is something that's not slowing down, and it's a very large capacity for the country. And we also see the revenue that's being generated at about $120,000 a megawatt of installation. So this can be applied anywhere from the grid scale levels down through the industrial and the commercial based applications. And we see a very big opportunity in the commercial and industrial space behind the meter going forward. So Australia is an early adopter. We're a country that is really favourable terms in this space, and something that most businesses can invest in and get a solid return. So I mentioned behind the meter, in front of the meter, and I think today I'm going to focus a little bit more on behind the meter and a new offering that we have there. But I don't want to take away from all the work that we've been doing as ABB in front of the meter. I mean, if I look at some of the biggest projects in Australia today, where ABB is involved at, if we look at the Kalala battery energy storage system in Tamworth, or the Williamsdale battery energy storage in Canberra, over in Wellington at Arana battery energy storage, or Karangi storage in Victoria, ABB's on the utility side there and providing support and part of those networks, even down in the Riverina at the Darling Point energy storage system, providing capacity straight off the Transgrid 300 megawatt systems there off their substations. So ABB is very much on the front end of the system, providing large scale infrastructure and support around battery energy storage systems and large containerized battery energy storage solutions. But today I'm going to talk a little bit more around behind the meter, and then what customers are able to do in the behind the meter space. A replication of this would be what we do in our homes with solar and some kind of battery energy storage on our home, but taking that up to a commercial or an industrial grade level for many of our customers, this is a huge option. So to kick this off, I'll just go to a short video, and hopefully we can get this to play and show you what this is all about as a service model.
What if you could take control of energy? What if you could pay less for the power you use? What if you could do all this without any upfront capital expenditure?
BESS as a service enables you to focus on what's important for your business without worrying about your energy.
A battery energy storage system, or BESS, is an on-site battery that stores your energy ready for when you need it most. By storing energy when it's cheap, you can cut your energy bills. You can even turn power into profit by trading energy back to the grid when prices rise.
Depending on the time of day and the grid that you're on, it's very common to have peak rates much higher than the off-peak rates. In these cases, we can use the battery to charge at the lower rates and discharge at the higher rates, saving the customer a significant amount of money.
Batteries are key to an electrified, decarbonized future. With ABB's BESS as a service, you can rely on 100% renewable energy, confident that you'll always have power when you need it.
ABB's BESS as a service supports a greener, more sustainable future for energy systems around the world. The sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. With BESS as a service, excess energy produced during the high generation can be stored in batteries, and then it can be released when demand peaks or renewable generation drops.
With ABB's BESS as a service, you can get all the benefits of an on-site battery energy storage system without any of the associated upfront costs.
The BESS as a service model offers a lot that buying an outright battery doesn't offer to customers. Fundamentally, it lets businesses use battery storage without high upfront costs or technical burden.
All of the things that we cover as part of the offering reduce and remove risk from the customer. So we're going to handle the installation and commissioning, we're going to handle the design of the system, we're going to handle the ongoing maintenance of the system as well.
It's a great example of being both more cost efficient and more sustainable at the same time. It's flexible, it's scalable, it doesn't require upfront costs, and this makes it easier for businesses to manage energy efficiently, stay prepared for power and price changes without having to incur all this capital expense.
BESS as a service from ABB. Power your possibilities and take control of energy.
So just to sort of elaborate a bit on what Bob conveyed there at the end, one of the things that we found for most of the commercial and industrial behind the meter customer space was this these barriers for them to move forward into this space. So while we're providing grid scale batteries in front of the meter and support and substation infrastructure for the utility space and very high-end industrial, we're at site with many commercial and industrial players in the field, and there was this huge opportunity to help them not only react to this trilemma around reliability, financing, and sustainability, but give them a real lowering of this barrier to entry into the market. So what we developed was this package offering, and it's been available in Europe now for a while, and now we're pushing into the Australian and the US markets with the offering. There's a key couple of areas here to help the customer. The first is, as a service organisation, we come to the site and we help assess it, as Bob said. We provide advisory services, we help install the battery, we assess the site, and then we put a package offering together. So yes, we can monitor and assess a battery that you've installed, and we can maintain that asset over its life cycle. But this way we can also help you size it. We can put predictive monitoring and maintenance programs together and put a package around that to a subscription fee. And that subscription fee can be across a 10 or 20-year contract with ABB, and you're just paying a quarterly subscription fee for the offering. ABB takes care of the battery, the sizing, the installation and commissioning, the maintenance of it, and we look after that asset for that 10 to 15 years. And as the customer, they pay the subscription fee. We generally can get back to a positive cash flow for the customer. We can provide support around energy arbitrage, which we'll talk a little bit about Grid Beyond. And we saw this was an important part of the offering. So a few years ago, ABB put an investment in Grid Beyond, and we've been working with them, as I said, for a couple of years in Europe, and Grid Beyond's had some great success here in Australia. And now we're providing that and supporting this package as a service model for a subscription model for batteries. And then we're out there helping support not only the ESG targets for the customers, but we're also looking at full life cycle management. So as we look at the 10-year life cycle, we recycle batteries, we do a battery upgrade in the unit. And at the 20-year life cycle, we then do the full decommissioning and take care of the asset for the customer. It's a scalable offering that we provide, but I think it's definitely a lower barrier to entry for many customers to enter the market, and it's scalable based on the customer needs. But then if we look at a few cases here, I mentioned around the business parks and the economics around it. This particular case, we're doing a business park in the UK. Their electricity costs we were able to reduce by about 80%. there was a cash year benefit around £92,000 a year, which is about 200,000 Australian dollars. So some great opportunities in business parks that we've been looking at. When it comes to EV, we talk a lot about infrastructure over large sort of geographies. I was disgusted here in Australia going up to the Blue Mountains one day, finding an EV charger on up there with behind the wall a diesel generator feeding the EV charger. So we've been working with Ionity, particularly through Southeast Europe, putting platforms in place and grid support on long feeder lines of battery energy storage to give the capacity they need for high-speed DC charging across their network, and providing any up to 1 megawatt EV fast charging capacity. And in Europe, some countries need chargers every 60 kilometres along their road networks, and they don't have the grid infrastructure to support that. And as you may know, ABB is a big EV charger supplier in the country. And then also on food and beverage, we've seen huge opportunities here in supporting around loss production, but also the food and beverage manufacturers, the bottling manufacturers, reach their CO2 targets and cutting their emissions. So with that, it's really what we're trying to do around the full asset life cycle. It's looking at the behind the meter offering for the customer. Again, we're still doing and will continue to do the primary side with the utility work, but we're offering a more effective and a lower barrier to entry into the market. We provide full assessment and site support for a customer taking this on in a brownfield or greenfield situation. We install and we optimize it. We look at full life cycle management all the way down to the recycling of the asset and the performance management of the battery. We look at the monitoring of the asset and the performance of it. And one interesting thing here, we've also packaged in, not only on the financing side, which is a huge barrier for many companies, but also we've looked at insurance as well. So we can guarantee the output of the battery energy storage unit. And if for any reason that were to fail through an act of God or whatever, we can make sure that we've got an insurance backup around this, so that the customer is then still covered whilst we're getting the battery back online and working. But we've also got monitoring around the asset and its performance, and then AI monitoring to drive the maximum out of energy arbitrage, which I know Chris is going to talk to you a little bit here. But that'll wrap it up, Giles. So I think you were going to do a survey or at this point in time, so I'll stop.
Yes,
and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stuart. Look, I'm actually just going to throw in a couple of questions because they're directly relevant to your presentation, and thanks very much for that. I think fantastic stuff, really interesting. A couple of questions about the $120,000 per megawatt saving figure, both over what time and what thing. You got a quick answer to that one?
Yeah. So that's over over a 12-month period, right? So we're monitoring it over a 12-month period, and that's the average rate that we've been able to achieve.
Okay. And someone just asked if that's, as part of that question, whether it's a tolling agreement, this sort of battery as a service thing. Is it the tolling type agreement, or is that just a different sort of description?
No, so we do we customize it per the customer. We take care of all the agreements with the trading of the utility. We work with Grid Beyond on that. But the agreement is basically a monthly subscription. And then in the highest level of economic output as a service, we have a shared benefit agreement with the customer. Okay. So we add that in at the end of the package. So you got your monthly subscription and you got the shared benefit option as well with the customer.
And someone's just asked how much.
Well, it really depends on the site. So
yes,
on different sites and different grid connection points, it's customized for each, but some of them have been pretty significant for us. So it's bespoke around each customer offering, but we can usually get them a payback within the first 12 months.
Fair enough. Okay, that's exciting. Tanya, can we have the, we'll go to the poll question. What is the first one we have? Thank you very much. Oh, here we go. Host, we can't vote. Have you installed a battery storage system within the last 12 months? Yes, no, and maybe, I think, are the options. Thank you very much for all the questions. We've got through a couple of them, but we've got a lot more there, so I really do appreciate that. And we're now into our second presentation from Chris O'Brien from Grid Beyond. He's the Managing Director of Grid Beyond Australia. He's had more than 16 years experience in the energy sector. He's previously held leadership roles at Edge Zero and at SunPower as head of APAC and LATAM. So Chris, welcome back to a Renew Economy webinar. Great to have you back again.
Yeah, vaguely familiar this seat. So thanks, Stuart, for your presentation as well. I'm going to be very quick. Really what we are is a complementary orchestration layer that sits over the top of the energy in the battery. And so once you have that BESS in place, you need this orchestration layer that ensures you gain the most value from it. So that's where we come in. And our heritage goes back to behind the meter energy optimization through controls and software. And really since 2010, we've been assisting asset owners derive maximum value through creating a bridge between assets and markets, understanding both of them very deeply, in order to build automated, scalable, smart market interfaces. So this same technology is active in utility scale projects where our platform automatically trades larger scale BESS front of the meter to optimize revenue stream for asset owners. But in this case, what we're talking about is behind the meter and the orchestration of the energy stored in a ABB BESS solution. So in Australia, we've been active in the NEM since 2022. Our initial market entry was into the demand response markets. In more recent times, we've launched additional platform capabilities that have taken us into asset and market optimization. And these capabilities are really based on our core global solution. And that core global solution is AI forecasting, the infrastructure to support that, the solvers and the user interfaces. And then when we go into a market like Australia, we lay over region-specific items such as inputs, being data sources, and the outputs, how we put our bids and offers together as we move from different jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And then there's a final customer layer which we work with ABB on to configure the front-end setup at that customer asset at that site-specific level. So coming back to the optimization value and getting that from the BESS. So this is an enabling piece in the asset control platform. This is denoted here as the VPP. We know the term virtual power plant typically in Australia as an aggregation platform for assets across multiple sites. In this context, the VPP is the brain that works with the energy management system on site. And that could be a SCADA system or a localized control panel. The decision engine of the VPP uses machine learning or AI to forecast energy and other market prices on the NEM in your location. This allows optimization of any participation in markets, ensuring that decisions on which markets you're going into maximizes the value for you. And for those sites with the battery storage, which is what we're focused on here, optimization extends to energy and capacity of the battery to maximize the value. And the reason capacity is important is it's not only related to what markets you're going to go into, but it's when you're going to go into them. Are you going to go into them now when wholesale prices might be $500 a megawatt hour? Or are you going to hold and go into them in 2 or 3 hours where the forecast is telling you it's going to be much higher? So the other thing that the VPP does is work with the constraints. And there are always constraints on an asset. The most fundamental of those constraints is the warranty conditions, the cycle limitations around the battery. And so they are programmed in to our optimization platform as constraints, and they become essentially the guardrails within which we optimize. And the final piece of the puzzle here, you can see on the right-hand side here, is what we call process optimization. So with a platform forecasting and controlling, modulating assets based on markets and opportunity, we can also develop a interface into your production process to ensure that what we're doing is optimizing your output, not only the market interfaces and the market value. What we do is we lay over a 7-day ahead production plan and identify any flexibility in your process. And this process optimization occurs within the asset parameters, not only of the battery, but of your production plan. So the outcome really is a holistic approach to lower your energy spend and therefore your marginal cost of production. And the foundation for all this is our forecaster. You need to have a forecaster you can trust. The Grid Beyond Price Forecaster leverages comprehensive suite of data inputs to train our patented forecast models and generate accurate price predictions for your specific region. There are piles of inputs, We're talking about market data, so real-time regional data, historic market clearing prices, regional price separation patterns, the system conditions, so what's happening in terms of demand forecasts on the NEM, what's happening with the generators, what's their rebidding behaviour, what are their outage schedules, what's happening with wind and solar, what's happened historically with congestion, and what's the weather doing. All this rolls into this forecast. And you'll see here we're noting that our current backcast for the first half of the year delivered a result that was 17% more accurate than the AEMO P5 forecast. And this is my last slide, because what essentially occurs is there's a connection between a forecaster and an optimization layer. So the forecaster is the foundation. Over the top of it, decisions need to be made to maximize the value from the BESS. And this is done in this optimizer layer. And this is really our intelligent decision engine that processes all the inputs through a multi-layered AI framework, combining physics-based asset modeling with adaptive market intelligence to maximize revenue generation. So the optimizer continuously evaluates opportunities across all possibilities, selecting the most profitable strategies, whilst managing within the operational constraints that I mentioned. So it's a real-time optimization of markets, and if you are in that process optimization piece, also what's happening behind the meter in terms of other value streams that might be on site. So the key message I want to leave you with, as you consider partnering with ABB on their BESS, is that Grid Beyond's partnership with ABB will provide you peace of mind that your asset will be operated within its natural constraints, in compliance with the NEM market rules, whilst being focused on maximising the value stream for you long term. So I'll hand it back to you, Giles.
Thank you very much, Chris. Tanya, we might get the poll results up if we can. Before that, while we're waiting for that, Chris, there's a couple of questions about sustainability and emissions reductions claims. I mean, how do you sort of, how's that, where is it? Can reduce emissions. How would this be possible for commercial business with reduction targets to demonstrate or quantify? And I guess a lot of it's got to do with, behind the meter stuff, or even just charging from the grid. And how much solar and renewables you're putting in there. But I guess, how do you quantify and how do you demonstrate that?
Yeah, so if I go back to the logic around the optimization of the BESS, everyone knows what's happening in terms of the duck curve and how it's getting deeper during the day and more negative in terms of prices. So those negative prices are really an overflow of renewables onto the grid and not having enough demand to match that. So essentially, our optimization algorithm will be drawing the energy at those lowest prices, which is primarily delivered through renewable energy. So that will be charging the battery. So you can think about it as putting renewable energy from the grid into your battery for use later on during peak demand behind the meter times. In terms of quantifying it, that's a little harder. Now, if you have solar on site, you can certainly quantify it because the energy management system is plugged into our optimization platform, and you can see where those electrons are actually coming from. So you can quantify it when you have your own generation behind the meter.
Okay. Let's get back to that poll. This is the answer to the first one. 21% of respondents said they've got a battery. More than a third, 37%, plan to install one in the next 12 months. I wonder if that's got something to do with the rebates. And there's 42% say no and no immediate plans. So thank you very much for that. Can we put up the next poll, please? And while we're doing that one, oh, here we go. What's the main challenge you're facing when it comes to battery storage? And look, you've got 6 different answers there, so you can stare at that and work through them, and we'll look forward to hearing your answers. Look, Terence Hill was the first person off the line, so let's go and ask him in the questions. This might be one for you, Stuart, or possibly Chris, I don't know. What do the presenters think of the role of microgrids might play in mitigating vulnerabilities of the existing grid? And I guess that might be a question for data centers, where they go. Do they stay on the grid and have a big battery, or do they? Yeah. Any thoughts?
Yeah, look, we've seen significant investments in microgrids and getting offline outside of the system. We're seeing large investments in generation from data centers supporting the grid, but in their own microgrid-based environment. So we see also DC microgrids being formed as well. So they're mitigating the risks of, or the losses of power conversion, AC, DC, as the latest platforms within data centers as well, especially as we go to large scale AI data centers. So if you look at all the big hyperscalers, even the CoreWeaves and others, they are even working down into DC microgrids inside their data centers at this point in time. So it's there's a lot of work going on in these spaces today.
Interesting. Hey, I was just fascinated by your, you said you were in Dublin and talking to a hyperscaler there. I was reading the other day that Ireland, I think, is probably one of the most popular places for data centers and accounts for up to 20 or 30% of demand. I'm just wondering, why is that?
A lot of it was very smart investment from the government and a very low tax break for most of these international players. So if you're just north of Dublin, you can literally list every hyperscaler as you drive along the road. It's like data center alley, right? So you got your Microsofts, your TikToks, your Facebooks. I mean, they're all in this large section of Dublin. And then Ireland also did very well in the pharmaceutical space as well, around Cork. So all your big global pharmaceuticals are there as well. So huge infrastructure in place, huge amounts of skills. Data centers there are only up to 10 to 15 years of age. So we're spending time there retrofitting and upgrading data centers. Utilities generally upgrade every 30 to 50 years infrastructure. The big hyperscalers are upgrading and putting new tech in every less than 10 years now. They'll completely rip out and go again. But Ireland's done exceptionally well from a very low tax base and a strong global incentive for data centers.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions about the mechanics of these offerings. Chris, first one here for you. Does Grid Beyond focus exclusively on market opportunities, or first delivering customer savings and then using spare capacity, quote unquote, to maximize the market opportunity?
You know, what we're all about at Grid Beyond is creating value for the customer in taking them on a journey to net zero, essentially. So that could be around behind the meter load optimization, could be with the battery, it could be market participation, it could be demand response. So our focus is really the controls and interface with the market that is creating value for both the market and the customer.
Mm.
So think of us as a software provider, really, that has really smart AI-driven, machine learning-driven forecasting and optimization to identify where the best value is in the market and take our customers in there.
There's a couple of questions about retailers too. Which retailer do you partnering with? Do customers still get to choose their own retailer?
Certainly from Grid Beyond's perspective, we don't retail energy. That's usually bought by the customer, but I'll let Stuart answer that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're agnostic to that. They choose their retailer, they choose their rate from the retailer, and we manage it off that retailer.
Okay, fair enough.
We don't specify the retailer, we don't specify the battery tech. We wrap it around both of those.
And there's another question here about government incentives. Are there any for this service? Yes, I guess that's probably in reference to the current rebates, and I guess that would depend on the size of the battery.
Yeah. It'll depend on the size of the installation, where it's at, and how we could apply it from there.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Are there any cases there's one from Lopa. Are there any use cases of battery as a service in the manufacturing and mining industry sectors? If so, can you elaborate?
I think in the presentation, I mentioned a large scale food and beverage company in manufacturing. That Swiss large scale company, they had a large facility in Europe. They had invested heavily in solar on their facility. They'd had several outages from the utility, and they were really stuck with capital expenditure at that particular site, but they could build it into their maintenance program and budget. So we were able to bring in battery energy storage as a service. We were able to finance it for them. We did a full system analytics of their electrical infrastructure, recommended the size of the battery. We provided the battery and took it to site, and they took it on for a 20-year period. So they have 20 years of monitoring from Northern Italy, from ABB. They monitor the asset. They do all of the availability as a service requirements through to end of life to meet their scope 1 and 2 and their scope 3 for their customers from an ESG perspective, and they are in a shared quarterly fee benefits payout for that installation as well. So they were happy on the sustainability side. They were having issues with curtailing of energy from the solar back into the grid, which we helped them address, and they went for the full offering from ABB.
Okay. There's a couple of other questions here. There's a lot of people are pretty interested in what you're offering, it seems. There's lots of questions about it. What are the main barriers for the business? Time, internal people to manage the energy. And there's another question here too, if I can find it again. We've got so many questions just about the sites in unmanned in rural and remote locations, and how do you manage the safety risks in those environments? Although I think someone's actually hopped on to answer that one, but let's give the answer to everybody.
Let me maybe try to address both. Firstly, the unmanned one. We have full software managing across the system, and we're managing that remotely. I mentioned some island nations up in the Philippines. We have more than 150 installations of battery energy storage systems in pretty remote areas, fully monitored from Singapore 24/7, and algorithms across that to monitor the asset. We do that in real time and monitor that. We've been doing that for a couple of years now for that utility provider up there. So from a remote monitoring standpoint and asset monitoring, we have a lot of data that we get back, and we've been using that data to help fine-tune our maintenance programs and performance around that. We also have battery energy storage systems with different chemistries across the world, and we also have them in different environments. Australia is a huge country. You have humid environments in the north, you have colder climates, you have hotter climates. So we're pulling a lot of data around battery application and that around the world from a safety perspective, and changing those algorithms as we go forward and fine tuning the algorithm. I would say. I'd say one of the biggest inhibitors for us in getting this rolled out, it does take a lot of manpower and support to get to a customer's site and do those detailed assessments. We've digitized most of those assessments. Quite often customers don't know even what they have on their site, and we have to even get down to single line diagrams to assess what they actually have and give them the assessment in the first place. Once we've got that first assessment and we know what we need to install, we know what sizing it is, it then usually comes down to internal company processes and systems and approval levels based on an operational versus a CapEx expenditure. This is not normal. Normally they need to go and invest so many $1 million in capital expenditure. They're very well budgeted for that. It's usually how do they build into an operating model within their own financial networks. But from a physical installation, production of the units, the monitoring of the asset, that's not the problem. It's usually the full site assessment and what the customers know and can provide you around their site up front.
You mentioned battery chemistries, and there was a question or two about that beforehand. I can't find them now, but is there anything interesting coming up in terms of battery chemistries? I mean, a lot of it's lithium ion, and there's a couple of different chemistry mixes in that sort of...
Yeah, you got your NMCs to your LFPs, right? So
yes,
you've sort of moved to that model of what you put in a motor vehicle versus what you put in an energy storage system. There's quite a few recycling programs going on from car batteries in the battery storage systems, particularly in countries like Germany today. There was a question, I think, about sodium ion, vanadium flow, soluble flow batteries. A lot of these are from an environmental impact and a recycling perspective, we can get a much higher performance from a sustainability aspect as we recycle the asset after the 10 or 20 years and give the customer a certificate to do that. But yeah, you're seeing a shift. You're seeing some companies wanting to go in certain directions. But we monitor and test that technology, and then we look at from our perspective, we look at the top suppliers from a quality perspective on a global basis. When it comes to even manufacturing here in Australia, we're testing what's being done here as well, because obviously from a cost perspective, having the batteries locally sourced versus geographically, and with all the tariffs and the modifications around the world, we're sourcing much more local content now and teams locally, and even from the sourcing of Grid Beyond and the monitoring they're doing here locally as well.
Okay.
So that's definitely happening.
Yeah, you mentioned sodium, and just a very quick answer. You mentioned sodium and flow batteries. I mean, are they competitive commercially, or are they still coming down the tunnel, if you like?
Probably Giles put in your term, they're coming more down the tunnel. But what I would say is it depends on what the customer values.
Yes.
Right? If the customer's really valuing long-term sustainable results, then they're giving a bigger value on the ESG side. If they're site constrained with physical space and that's another constraint that you have in the different chemistries of the battery. So my long-term answer here is it depends. Because everybody values things differently, from a pure dollar value to sustainability, and that trilemma that I spoke about it.
Yeah. Chris, there's a couple of questions here about how you get revenue from a battery storage. Is it just beyond energy savings? And I guess it's related. It's just really about sort of sizing in kilowatt and kilowatt hours, and getting the right can they be applied across can you apply a suite of batteries across an organization's facilities, and how do you get the right size? So you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's retail tariffs that most commercial and small industrial businesses are on, but some of the larger guys are on spot prices, so a wholesale pass-through. When you're in that case where you've got a wholesale pass-through, every kilowatt hour that you push back to the grid, you get paid wholesale rate. So that's the most obvious way of generating revenue from dispatching energy. There are some other mechanisms that are developing in the market now where you can have a child meter and potentially participate in the wholesale market. And that's coming rapidly into the market. So there are other ways to generate value from the battery other than offset behind the meter or pushing it into different loads.
Okay, yeah. A couple of questions here about data centers, Stuart. Do you find that data centers with grid connection and BESS are sufficient to meet their energy reliability requirements, or are they still putting in diesel gensets as backups?
It's still, like, if I take, I'll give you an example. There's a very large AI data center. It's the largest AI data center in the world going in North Dakota at the moment. It's the first fully liquid-cooled data center. They've got significant battery systems in play, but they've still got 37 diesel generators on site as even a backup to that. So their level of reliability on the data center today, they're using all three. They're using grid, batteries, and generators, but that's an absolute extreme, right?
Yeah.
And they're doing liquid flow with NVIDIA. It's a very high-profile project. But down at some of the legacy data centers, I mentioned some in Dublin, they're actually using the batteries to not only support the data center, but to supply back to the grid, especially in some very peak times. And they're able to generate huge money for that hyperscaler there. So they're still using all. They haven't got off the generators, but they do see significant risk in that regular maintenance check on generators, the firing up every month and validation.
Yeah.
Where we're seeing it more other than data centers is places like hospitals. We are seeing hospitals move to pure battery storage because the load levels are significantly less, and they can see a zero glitch in their emergency rooms and critical infrastructure in places like that. So data centers not yet, not big enough yet, but hospitals and critical infrastructure, yes.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, can we get the results of the poll? I almost forgot about that, or I did forget about that. And here we go. What's the main challenge you're facing? Capital expenditure, upfront costs. Yes. Renewable integration, interesting. Site constraints, 14. Grid accessibility, 14. Yeah, that seems. Well, of course, it's fair because it's what you've answered. So it's really interesting. There was a question earlier, Stuart, or maybe for Chris, about how do you get a CFO across the line when you're talking about capital expenditure and upfront costs? And I guess that's why you're providing a battery as a service. It's more of a subscription model. But either of you want to address that one?
Yeah, look, usually it's that level that you're actually talking to on these kind of jobs, right? The fact that you're taking the full ownership of the asset, the maintenance. There was another question about whether you take the financing and the insurance together or whether we split them apart. In cases we have split them apart because people don't want to have the extra level of insurance. The CFOs, like, we've got our own insurance, we can cover that portion of it. But it's usually that financial discussion with the CFO. I can tell you from an ABB, raising the capital and raising the funding, there's a lot of funding out there to do this. We've got a very strong line of funding to be provided to this space. So funding's not our limitation. So sitting down with the CEO, it's all about the ROI for them and the models, and doing a bespoke offering for the site and presenting it back to the CFO. It's usually not a very tough discussion for us, given the payback. They're usually looking for a 2 to 3 year payback. We're coming back in less than a year. It's a pretty convincing offering for them. in doing that. So,
good. Look, I think we're probably coming to an end of our time. Chris, do you have any sort of 10-second, 15-second last thoughts there?
No, nothing really to add. I think Stuart has covered it really well. But from our perspective, the important thing is not only getting the energy storage on site, but actually using it well, and that's where we come in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I'd particularly like to thank ABB and Grid Beyond for sponsoring this webinar. I'd like to thank Stuart and Chris for their presentations. I'd like to thank everyone who turned up, listened, asked lots of questions. We had about more than 40 questions, and apologies to those that we can't get to. A couple of questions about whether the slides will be available. I think so. I think I just got to double check with Chris and Stuart and the people that boss them around. But they're normally put up at the end of it anyway. Look, thanks to Tanya and Sam for their work behind the scenes, putting the polls up. And yeah, thank you once again. You've listened to another Renew Economy webinar, this one in conjunction with ABB and Grid Beyond. And we'll see you again sometime soon. Bye for now.